Senior, please! Senior, please! Please!
Senior, please! Senior, please!
Bad boy, that is what Kofi is. He is a bad boy and a bully. But the only way to stand up to a bully is to look him in the eye and teach him a lesson he will never forget. Watch and learn how a junior secondary school girl taught Kofi the bully a lesson he will never forget. And that lesson was the legend, Mr. Keys. When I think of Kofi Atta, I always think of his knuckles. Not his face, not his voice, his knuckles. They were always raw, always scabbed, always ready. He would crack them before he hit you. Pop, 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 like he was warming up for a performance. And hitting you was always a performance. Kofi Atta didn't just beat juniors. He made sure people watched. He was Form 5, art student, tall, dark, with eyes that went dead when he was angry, which was often. He was the kind of bully who didn't need a reason. If you looked at him wrong, if you didn't look at him at all, if you were smaller, if you were newer, if you were just there. His friends called him Commander. Everyone else called him nothing. They looked down when he passed. This was Central Senior High School, mixed school. Boys' quarters on the east side of campus, girls' quarters on the west. A dead field in the middle where they held assembly every morning under the hot sun. Classrooms with broken windows. A dining hall where the food was always the same. Waki on Mondays, jollof on Wednesdays, and something they called stew on Fridays that nobody trusted. Kofi Atta had been there for 3 years. 3 years of ruling. 3 years of making juniors kneel on the concrete floor of the dormitory while he sat on a bed and asked them questions they couldn't answer correctly. What is my name? Commander, sir? What is your purpose? To serve the commander, sir? Wrong.
Pop, pop, pop. The knuckles would come, the junior would cry, Kofi's boys would laugh. Another night in the boys' quarters. But this story isn't really about Kofi Atta. Not at first. Her name was Essie Mensah, Form 2, new girl. She came from a village up north, some place nobody had heard of. Her father was a pastor, her mother sold oranges at the market. She had come to Central Senior High on a scholarship because she scored high in the BECE, top of her district, top of her region even. The headmaster, Mr. Ofori, mentioned her name at assembly once, said she was the kind of student the school needed. Kofi Atta heard that and smiled. He found her on her 3rd day. She was walking from the dining hall back to the girls' quarters, holding her plate. He stepped in front of her with 2 of his boys, Ya, the tall one, and Mensah, the quiet one who laughed when Kofi laughed. New girl, Kofi said. Essie stopped. She looked at him, didn't look down. You are the one from the north, Kofi said, the one the headmaster was praising. Essie said nothing. You know what we do to new people here? I know what you do, Essie said. Her voice was calm, too calm. Kofi's smile tightened. Oh, you know? I heard. You make them kneel, you hit them, you take their food. She looked at his knuckles. You like hitting people who can't hit back. Ya laughed nervously. Mensah shifted his weight. Kofi stepped closer. You think you're special because you scored high? You think book smart matters here? I think, Essie said, still not looking away, that one day somebody will hit back. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in Kofi's eyes. Not fear, something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Then he laughed. Take our plate, he told Ya. Ya grabbed it. Essie let him. She stood there empty-handed, watching them walk away. When they were gone, she turned and continued walking to the girls' quarters. She didn't cry. She didn't run. Somebody was watching from the classroom window. A teacher, Mr. Akoto. He wrote something in a small notebook and put it back in his pocket.
3 nights later, Kofi Atta couldn't sleep. This wasn't unusual. He often couldn't sleep. The dormitory was hot, the mattresses were thin, and his mind ran at night, planning, scheming, remembering who owed him what. But this night was different. He heard something. Jingle. Keys. Like a bunch of keys, shaking. The dormitory was dark. He could see the other boys sleeping. Ya snoring, Mensah curled in a ball, the junior boys at the far end lying still because they were afraid to move even in sleep. Jingle, closer now. Kofi sat up. Who's there? Nothing. He waited. The sound had come from the corridor outside. He listened. The night was heavy, the kind of quiet that comes only in boarding schools after midnight when even the crickets are tired. Then he saw it, a shadow, moving past the window. Not a person, just a shape, darker than the darkness, sliding along the wall, and with it, the sound. Jingle.
The corridor was empty, just the concrete floor, the doors to the other dormitories, the notice board with its faded posters about exams and lost property. No one. He stood there for a long time, listening. The sound didn't come again. But when he turned back to his bed, he noticed something on his pillow. A single key. Old, rusted, not like any key he'd seen before. He picked it up. It was cold, too cold, like it had been in ice water. He threw it out the window and went back to sleep. In the morning, he forgot about it. The next day, Kofi found Essie again. She was in the classroom block, Form 2 section, doing prep before morning assembly. He walked in with Yao and Mensah. The other juniors in the room went quiet, heads down, pretending to read. Essie looked up from her book. "You," Kofi said. She waited. "I heard your father is a pastor," he said. "I heard you people think God protects you." Essie closed her book slowly. "I don't need God to protect me from you." Kofi laughed. The other juniors flinched. Yao grinned. "You think you are tough," Kofi said. "Let's see how tough you are tonight, after lights out, behind the dining hall." He didn't wait for an answer. He walked out. Behind him, one of the juniors, a small boy named Ade, whispered to Essie, "Don't go. He'll hurt you. He hurts everybody." Essie looked at the door where Kofi had disappeared. He already hurts everybody. Maybe it's time somebody hurt him back. Mr. Akoto was the assistant housemaster for the boys' quarters. He was a young teacher, maybe 28, with glasses that kept slipping down his nose and a habit of writing things down in a small notebook he carried everywhere. He had been at Central Senior High for 2 years. In that time, he had seen things. Juniors forced to kneel on broken bottles, boys made to run laps at midnight until they collapsed, food stolen, money taken, names called, spirits broken. He had reported it many times. The senior housemaster, Mr. Arthur, always said the same thing. These things have always happened. It's part of school life. It builds character. Mr. Akoto didn't think character was built with broken bottles. He wrote in his notebook, Kofi Atta, Form 5, 3 years of bullying, targets, juniors, new students, anyone who can't fight back. Latest target, Essie Mensah, Form 2. Then he wrote something else, Mr. Keys. He had heard the stories every teacher had. The sound of keys in the dark, the shadow that walked the corridors at night. Some said it was the ghost of a former student who had been bullied to death decades ago. Some said it was a warning. Some said it was nothing. Mr. Akoto didn't know what he believed, but he knew what he had seen last night.
standing at the window of the staff quarters, looking toward the boys' dormitory. A figure, dark, moving along the wall, and the sound, faint but clear, of keys. He hadn't told anyone.
That night, Essie went to the dining hall. She didn't tell anyone, not her roommate Akwa, who begged her not to go, not the senior girls who had warned her about Kofi on her first day. She just walked. Behind the dining hall was a patch of dirt where the kitchen workers dumped old food. The smell was bad. Rats scurried in the shadows. No lights back there, just the dark, and the moon when it showed itself. Kofi was waiting. Yao and Mensah stood behind him. "You came," Kofi said, "stupid girl." Essie stomped a few feet away. She was wearing her school uniform, white blouse, blue skirt. Her braids were neat. Her face was calm. "You said behind the dining hall," she said. "I'm here. You think because you came we won't touch you?" "I think," Essie said, "that you should listen." Kofi laughed. "Listen to what?" "The sound." They all heard it. Jingle. Keys. Shaking. Close. Kofi spun around. Nothing. Just the dark, the smell of old food, the scurrying rats. "Who's there?" Yao's voice was higher than usual. No answer. Jingle. Closer now, coming from the direction of the kitchen. Mensah took a step back. "Kofi, let's go." "Shut up." Kofi's voice was hard, but his eyes were moving, searching the darkness. The sound came again, right behind them. They all turned. A figure stood at the corner of the dining hall. Dark, tall, impossible to see clearly, but they could hear it. Breathing, slow, heavy, and in its hand, a bunch of keys. Old keys, rusted keys, catching what little moonlight there was. Kofi felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Real fear. The kind that makes your blood go cold and your feet forget how to run. Who are you?" His voice cracked. The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, breathing, holding the keys. Then it moved, not walking, gliding, coming toward them. Yao ran first. Mensah followed. Kofi stood frozen for 1 second, one long terrible second, and then he ran too. Behind them, the sound followed. Jingle, jingle, jingle. Essie didn't run. She stood where she was, watching the figure approach. It stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. She still couldn't see its face, just darkness where a face should be. But she could feel it, looking at her. Why? The voice was soft, old, like something from far away. Essie didn't ask what it meant. She knew. Because they need to learn, and nobody else will teach them. The figure was silent for a moment. Then it nodded once. The keys jingled one more time. Then the figure was gone, just gone, like it had never been there. Essie walked back to the girls' quarters. Her heart was beating fast, but her face was calm. She didn't tell anyone what happened. But Kofi Atta didn't sleep that night. Neither did Yao. Neither did Mensah. Because the sound followed them all the way to their dormitory, all the way to their beds, standing outside their windows. Jingle, waiting. At assembly the next morning, Kofi Atta looked different. His eyes were red. His uniform was wrinkled. He hadn't ironed, which was unusual for him. He stood at the back of the boys' section, not talking, not looking at anyone. Yao stood beside him, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Mensah wasn't there. Sick, they said. Mr. Akoto noticed, and he wrote in his notebook, Kofi, Yao, look shaken. Mensah absent. Something happened last night. The headmaster, Mr. Ofori, gave his usual speech about hard work and discipline. The prefect marched the students to class. The day began. But something had changed.
In chemistry class, Kofi dropped his beaker, just let it slip out of his hand, glass everywhere. The teacher stared at him. Kofi didn't apologize. He just stood there, staring at nothing. At break time, he sat alone. No one came near him. Not because they were afraid, because he looked like someone who might explode. And in the girls' quarters, Essie sat on her bed reading a book. Akwa watched her from across the room. What happened last night? Essie turned a page. Nothing. You are lying. Essie looked up, smiled a little. Maybe. Akwa waited. Essie went back to her book. Outside the window, a sound drifted across the campus. Faint, like wind through old trees. Jingle. Essie didn't look up, but she smiled.
That afternoon, Mr. Akoto went to the school library. It was a small room with old books and newer dust. The librarian, Madam Ewurama, was sorting papers at her desk. She looked up when he entered. Mr. Akoto, research? History, he said. School history. Madam Ewurama tilted her head. What kind? The kind they don't talk about at assembly. She was quiet for a moment. Then she pointed to a shelf in the corner. Old records, yearbooks, logbooks. Help yourself. Mr. Akoto spent 2 hours going through yellowed pages and faded ink. He found what he was looking for in a logbook from 1987. December 12th. Incident reported. Student name, Kwame Asare. Form 5. Found deceased in the boys' dormitory corridor. Cause of death, unknown. Investigation pending. Below it, in different handwriting, January 15th, 1988. Investigation closed. Ruled natural causes. Student buried by family. Case closed. Natural causes. A 19-year-old boy found dead in a corridor. Mr. Akoto kept reading. There were more entries. Complaints about bullying in the years before 1987. Reports of a student named Kwame who was targeted by seniors, who was made to kneel for hours, whose food was stolen, who was beaten so badly he missed 2 weeks of school, and then the entry about his death. And then nothing. No follow-up, no disciplinary action, no names of the seniors involved, just silence. Mr. Akoto closed the logbook. That night, he stood at his window again, looking toward the boys' quarters. The moon was bright, the campus was quiet, and somewhere in the darkness, he heard it. Jingle. He didn't sleep that night either. 3 nights later, Kofi Atta broke. It was 2 in the morning. The dormitory was silent. The other boys were asleep or pretending to be. Kofi lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. The sound hadn't stopped since that night behind the dining hall. Every night, sometimes close, sometimes far, but always there, always waiting.
He hadn't told anyone. What could he say? A ghost with keys was haunting him? They'd laugh. They'd call him crazy. The commander doesn't believe in ghosts, but the commander couldn't sleep. Tonight was worse. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside, in the dormitory, moving between the beds. Jingle. Kofi squeezed his eyes shut. Jingle. Closer. He opened his eyes. A figure stood at the foot of his bed. Dark, tall, no face, just shadows where a face should be. And in its hand, keys, rusted, old, dangling. Kofi tried to scream. Nothing came out. The figure leaned closer. You know what you did. The voice was soft, old, familiar somehow. Kofi shook his head. Tears were running down his face now. The commander was crying like a junior. I don't, you know. The keys rose, pointed at him. You will stop. Kofi nodded, nodded, and nodded, and nodded. The figure straightened, turned, walked between the beds toward the door. Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Then it was gone. Kofi lay there until morning, shaking, crying, not sleeping. When the bell rang for assembly, he didn't move. Yao came to get him, took one look at his face and stepped back. What happened? Kofi looked at him with eyes that didn't seem like Kofi's eyes anymore. We have to stop, he whispered. Stop what? Everything. The next week was strange at Central Senior High. Kofi Atta stopped. No beatings, no forced kneeling, no food stealing. He walked past juniors without looking at them. He sat alone at meals. He didn't laugh when Yao made jokes. He didn't even crack his knuckles. Yao and Mensah didn't know what to do. They tried talking to him. He ignored them. They tried acting like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The juniors noticed. They whispered among themselves, "Commander is finished." Something happened to him. Did you see his eyes? Ajay, the small boy who had warned AC, came to her one afternoon. "What did you do?" he asked. AC was sitting under a tree, reading. She looked up. Nothing. "He's different. He's scared. Everybody can see it." AC closed her book. Maybe he saw something. What? I don't know. Maybe he saw himself for the first time. Ajay didn't understand, but he nodded anyway and walked away. That night, Mr. Akoto wrote in his notebook, "Bullying incidents down 100% in the past week. Kofi Atta isolated. Yao and Mensah confused. Mr. Keys has not been seen since the night behind the dining hall, but I heard him last night, standing outside my window, waiting, watching. Why?" He closed the notebook and looked at the darkness outside. The Keys were silent now, but they were still there, waiting. Friday afternoon, Kofi Atta stood outside the headmaster's office. He had never been called here before, not once in 3 years. He was the one who caused trouble, not the one who got caught. But today, Mr. Ofori had sent for him. He knocked. "Come in." Mr. Ofori sat behind his desk, a small man with glasses and a quiet voice that somehow made everyone listen. Beside him stood Mr. Akoto, notebook in hand. "Sit down, Kofi." Kofi sat. His hands were in his lap. He didn't crack his knuckles. "We've been hearing interesting things," Mr. Ofori said. "About you. About changes in your behavior." Kofi said nothing. "Is there something you want to tell us?" Kofi looked at Mr. Akoto, then at the headmaster, then at the floor. "I saw something," he said quietly. "What did you see?" Kofi shook his head. "You won't believe me. Try." Silence. Then Kofi spoke. He told them about the sound, the keys, the figure, the night behind the dining hall, the night in the dormitory, the face that wasn't a face. When he finished, Mr. Ofori was quiet for a long time. Then he opened a drawer in his desk, took out a key, old, rusted. "Have you seen this before?" Kofi's face went pale. That's the key, the one he holds." Mr. Ofori looked at Mr. Akoto. Mr. Akoto nodded. "This key," Mr. Ofori said slowly, "was found in the corridor of the boys' quarter in 1987 in the hand of a dead student. His name was Kwame Asare." Kofi stared at the key. "The case was closed, but the key stayed. I don't know why I kept it." Mr. Ofori turned it over in his fingers. "Maybe because I knew. Even then." "Knew what?"
That some things don't end when they end. He looked at Kofi. That some people keep walking, keep watching, keep waiting for justice. Kofi's voice was barely a whisper. Is he still here?" Mr. Ofori didn't answer. He just looked at the key. Outside the window, the sun was setting. The campus was quiet. Prep time would start soon. The dining hall would fill with students eating whatever was served. And somewhere, maybe in the corridor, maybe behind the dining hall, maybe standing outside a window, a sound would begin. Jingle. Mr. Akoto wrote in his notebook. Kofi confessed. Headmaster showed the key. Something is still here, watching, waiting. The question is, for what?
That night, AC sat on her bed in the girls' quarters. The other girls were asleep. The dormitory was quiet. Through the window, she could see the lights of the boys' quarters across the field. She hadn't seen the figure again, not since that night. But she felt it, watching, waiting. She didn't know why it had come, why it had helped her, why it had chosen to appear now. But she knew one thing. It wasn't finished. Because out there in the darkness, there were other Kofis, other bullies, other students who thought they could hurt people and get away with it, other teachers who looked the other way, other headmasters who kept keys in drawers instead of asking hard questions. The figure knew this. And tonight, for the first time, AC heard it again. Jingle. Not close, not threatening. Just there, reminding her. She looked out the window. Across the field, near the boys' quarters, a figure stood. Dark, watching. Not watching the boys. Watching her. Waiting for something. AC didn't move, didn't breathe. The figure raised one hand. In it, the keys caught the moonlight. Then it turned and walked into the darkness. Jingle, jingle, jingle. And then, silence. AC sat there until morning, wondering what it wanted, wondering why it had come to her, wondering if this was the beginning of something bigger. She didn't know, but she had a feeling she would find out. The next morning, Mr. Akoto found something on his desk. A key. Old. Rusted. The same key the headmaster had shown Kofi. But the headmaster's key was still in his drawer. Mr. Akoto had checked. So where did this one come from? He picked it up. It was cold. Too cold. And then he heard it. Jingle. Behind him. He turned. The door was open. The corridor was empty. But on the floor, leading away from his office, there were wet footprints, like someone had walked through snow. But it wasn't snowing. It wasn't even cold. Mr. Akoto followed them. They led to the boys' quarters, to the corridor where Kwame Asare had died in 1987. And there, on the floor, was another key, and another, and another. A trail of them, leading somewhere. Mr. Akoto looked up. At the end of the corridor, a figure stood, dark, watching. And for the first time, it spoke to him. Tell them. Tell them what? Mr. Akoto's voice shook. The truth. About me. About them. About what happens when nobody stops it. The figure raised its hand. The keys jingled. There are more. More keys. More stories. More students who never got justice. Mr. Akoto swallowed. What do you want me to do? The figure was silent for a moment. Find them. All of them. And when you do, it didn't finish. It didn't need to. Because in that moment, Mr. Akoto understood. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. To be continued. In episode 2, the trail of keys leads Mr. Akoto to other schools, other stories, other ghosts. Kofi Atta tries to change, but discovers that some people won't let him. AC learns the truth about the figure in the dark and why it chose her. And somewhere in the night, the keys keep jingling, waiting for the next chapter to begin. End of episode 1.